Good afternoon. We are the afternoon, right? Good afternoon to all of you. Really welcome to this great panel. I'm really happy to moderate. So on the G20 agenda and the roadmap and especially giving you the perspective of our esteemed panelists. You are probably the best speakers in the world to talk about those topics. So we are really we are really happy to have you here. So let me introduce you to Susan Koch. Susan is Deputy Governor of the Kenya Central Bank. Welcome, Susan. Faisal Alijawi. Faisal is Chief Strategy and Development Officer of Buna. Dimitri Patin is Deputy Director General of European Central Bank. And then Burkhard Balz, you are a member of the Executive Board of Deutsche Bundesbank. So welcome to all of you. And so I'm Marianne Dimarchi, I'm Chief Executive EMEA at SWIFT, and I'm really honored and happy to moderate this panel because it's really a topic which is really close to our heart. So before I ask our panelists some questions around the roadmap, where we stand and why it is important and so on, I'd like to give you just a little bit of context, maybe for those of you who needs to be refreshed on the G20 agenda. So during the G20 presidency of Saudi Arabia, the G20 leaders have made as a priority the enhancement of cross-border payments. Of course, there's clear link between fast, cheap, secure, transparent, accessible cross-border payments and global economy growth and trade. So they set a roadmap, an agenda, what we call an agenda, to increase cross-border, the efficiency of cross-border payments. And by 2027, so it's really near, by 2027, we will need to reach a couple of KPIs. So I will not enter into the details of the KPIs, but you have KPIs around speed, around cost, around transparency, accessibility. So it's really well detailed with a quantitative criteria and defined by segments. So the wholesale segments, so corporates basically, and then you have the retail segment and the remittances segment. And this roadmap has been developed by the FSB in coordination with the Committee on Payments and Market Infrastructures, the famous CPMIs, and other relevant international organizations and standard bodies to work around those criteria. And they bring also a few themes forward around infrastructure, data quality, and regulation and so forth, but also, and this is something that we will probably discuss about the joint vision between private and public. So let me start asking you the questions I'm sure everyone would like to know, at least I would like to know. So I'd like to ask you, to all of you, so why are these targets and why setting KPIs and targets by a deadline 2027 is important from your point of view, and how high is cross-border efficiency, cross-border payments efficiency on your central bank agenda? Maybe let me start by you, Burkhard.
Well, thank you, first of all, for the kind invitation, and good afternoon also from my side. Why is it high in our agenda? Well, Germany is one of the G20 countries, obviously, and so we are very much embedded as Germany in the global economy, which makes, of course, cross-border B2B payments a real important issue for us in our country and also for us at the Bundesbank. And Germany is also home of many migrants who send regularly money home, highlighting the importance of a functioning market also for remittances. And then when I mentioned those points, the Bundesbank is also very active really in enhancing the cross-border efficiency, both individually as an active participant, and then also a driver of several building blocks under the responsibility of the Committee for Payments and Market Infrastructures, so CPMI of the BIS. And as part of the Eurosystem, and I have to look here into the direction of Dimitri, so I'm under his also supervision in that respect. We are also involved in actions to make our own payment infrastructure more efficient, thus contributing to a more efficient and global payment landscape.
Thank you. Who would like to continue? Well, in order?
I can
okay,
try indeed. So the easy answer for that is to maybe quote the former chair of the CPMI, John Cunliffe, and he said, well, what gets measured gets solved. Yeah. And while preparing for this panel, I read a bit, and I was really surprised to see how many times we still see today a perceived inefficiency in cross-border payments. And as long as it's perceived, we have an issue, I guess. And that's the value of the targets that we have. Because when the perception is gone, then we acknowledge, and then when we acknowledge, there is probably more room for action. So what the G20 says is that there are good reasons for cross-border payments to be inefficient today, but what they say is that there are also means to solve that. So that needs to be understood. What I would like to add maybe is that this inefficiency in cross-border payments has become probably much more visible because of the tremendous improvements that we saw in domestic payments, and also with the ever-growing success of fast payment systems. So that makes the contrast very, very, very big. Until not long ago, I mean, it took me sometimes 1 or 2 days to move a few euros from my bank account with Bank A in Belgium to my bank account with Bank B in Belgium. And then it reduced to a few hours, but actually quite unpredictable. And today it's instant. You said speed and cost, access and transparency. In terms of cost, we still have an issue to solve in Europe, which is the cost of instant payment, which is still too often positioned as a premium service. But now with the IPR coming into motion in October next year, we expect actually the cost to go down quite significantly. And then I would dare to say that it's very likely that all the ingredients to make instant payment, at least domestically in Europe, I will come back to that later, really a commodity. So this is a commodity, and we often refer to instant payment become the new norm for payment, and we hope that this will come soon in Europe. Maybe one more point on the why it's important. It's because when we move from acknowledgement to action, we can really do changes. And I give you just a small example of Europe. If you open the box of Europe, you will very quickly see that Europe is a collection of countries with their own specificities. And when that translates into instant payment, it means 1 ACH per country on average. And with actually very limited interoperability. And what we did within the Eurosystem, not the ECB, the Eurosystem, we managed to create this interoperability between the ACHs, and we implement what we call the reachability measures. And that makes that any bank using 1 ACH can now reach another bank using another ACH and actually using TIPS, our instant payment system, as a hub, basically. And the point I want to make is that when there is conscience of a problem, then we can take action. I can tell you today, this is happening in Europe. I'm living in Germany, but my family is still in Belgium. And now when my son is asking in a shop, can you send me 10 euros? I can do that. Previously, that was more difficult.
Oh, you're happy it's only 10 euros then. Okay, thank you, Dimitri. Faisal?
Thank you, Marianne. Maybe I will just set a little bit of context before I answer the question, just for the benefit of the audience, who some of you might not be familiar with BUNA. So BUNA is a cross-border payment system initiative from the Arab central banks. It's owned by the Arab Monetary Fund. It serves today around 15 countries in 6 currencies, so 4 Arab currencies and 2 international currencies, with more than 100 banks that are participating in the system today. To the question, first of all, the Arab world today is a home of around 15 to 20% of the cross-border payment flows worldwide. So 15 to 20% of any transaction in the cross-border space involves an Arab country, whether on the send side or on the receive side. This is partly because of the trade, partly because of the large migrants living in the Arab world, partly because of the large Arab migrants living abroad. So from a macroeconomic landscape, it's a very important topic. The second thing is that we see the success of domestic payments inside the Arab countries, and this is a worldwide aspect as well. So domestic instant payments went far very nicely and successfully. So there is a huge expectations from users, being corporates or banks or individuals, to see similar experience on the cross-border space, which did not happen yet today. So this is another driver for us on believing and on supporting and on embracing the G20 targets. And last but not least also is the element of financial inclusion, because in our region we have a relatively low to mid financial inclusion rate in most of our countries. So we believe that the G20 targets and the measurability behind them also goes in that direction of supporting higher inclusion rates. So more payments, faster payments, lower cost payment or goes hand in hand with financial or with supporting financial inclusion rates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I think I can pick it from there, and especially just giving the perspective of emerging markets, and specifically the case of Kenya. The G20 target is actually critical, and especially on areas of accessibility, because it gives the agency from the government to be able to work on its infrastructure. I'll give the example of electricity connectivity, internet connectivity within the rural areas, so that we can be able to close the rural urban divide. It also gives the agency for government to be able to close the digital divide, and so be able to have accessible internet connections in the rural areas. And when you look at, especially within the East African community, the cost of remittances, especially, and payments in general, even within the Kenya-Tanzania corridor or Kenya-Rwanda corridor, who are members of the East African community, the cost is still very high. And so our working together towards the G20 targets will enable us to be able to bring down the cost. And in a country where, for Kenya, where we really are known on the mobile payment space, it's an opportunity for us to be able to continue to ensure that the costs are really coming down. And for the cross-border payments, we've seen an increase, especially of diaspora remittances because of the Kenyans in the diaspora. Last year, we had a growth of 5%, but year to date now, we've seen a growth of about 16% growth. Hence, continuously ensuring that the speed of, these payments, from where it originates to the Kenyans who are receiving the same is critical and important for us.
Okay, thank you. Well, before I ask you the second question, which will be around, okay, where do we stand, especially what can we do better? Let me give you just a few statistics that we have issued, and you can have the paper. It's a public paper. And we issued some statistics on speed. So just one of the criteria, which is speed. So the target that the G20 wants the global community to reach is that 75% of transactions be processed in less than an hour. And we had previously provided statistics on wholesale payments, so above 100,000 euros. And we did some analysis on all payments, so including lower value payments, which make a big part of also the volumes on SWIFT. And what we see is that from bank to bank, so the interbank, the flows, the pipe, of SWIFT, on the networks, it's 90% of transactions that reach that are processed within an hour, so from bank to bank. And this across all countries. I mean, some is, 80, some is a bit more than 90, but altogether there's no discrepancies between the top 40 countries that are the top senders and receivers countries on our network. However, when you look at the last mile, so the mile that counts from the beneficiary bank to the beneficiary, so the one who is waiting for his payment, then there's a lot of discrepancies. And it's a bit less than 50% that all reach within an hour. And you have countries, 4 countries that are above 75%, a big chunk of countries which are almost at the target, but remaining countries that are really below the target, and one even reaching only 5%. So we see that on this target, there's really an issue I would say at the bank or country level. And this can be, currency controls or processes, internal processes within banks, opening hours or batch processes. So there's a real need to work at the country level, at the last leg level. So what is your view on that, and what could we do better to improve that last leg, but also on the other KPIs, cost, transparency, accessibility? So maybe who wants to start?
I can give it a try. If you allow me, Marianne, just 1 second, I would like, because there were 2 questions in the first question. How high is it on our agenda? Yes. Just 2 seconds. There are 2 measures. First of all, no one should be surprised that it's high on the agenda, because it's really a statutory task for us to promote the efficient functioning of payment systems. I see 2 measurements of how high it's on our agenda. The first one is who is keeping him or herself busy with that, the pay grade. I can tell you on our side at the ECB, there is, for instance, today a conference in Washington where nothing less than the president of the ECB, Christine Lagarde, the former board member of the ECB, Fabio Panetta, who happens to be the governor of the Central Bank of Italy, and also the chair of the CPMI now, they are speaking in a panel in Washington today on interlinking, so and on the G20 targets, actually. So that's one measurement. The second measurement is the correlation between the targets and what we see concretely happening. And I can tell you, at least from our systems, we upgraded target 22, so the large value payment. We onboarded ISO 222, we'll come back to that. And we also increased the opening hours, which are 2 critical elements identified by the CPMI to improve the situation. Of course, these elements of format and opening hours is not relevant for the fast payment systems, but in our fast payment system, I will come back to that also as well later. We have the interlinking, which is really something that keeps us busy quite a lot. I want to rebound on one thing that you said, that the bank-to-bank, just to come to your question now. I'm not surprised, basically, because I mean, we have different layers. I don't know which one is the top or the bottom layer, but if we start with the first one, market infrastructures to bank, we see that 75% of the volumes, if we count volumes, already use ISO 20022. So that's done, basically, and there is more to come. Fedwire will migrate in March next year. So there, I would say the work is done. Bank to bank, it's the opposite. It's 75 are using ISO 20022, and most of you know that there is something happening next year in November, the end of the coexistence period. And so one of the key messages I wanted to pass today in the panel is we need to keep on pushing for increasing these figures. 25% must become 80 or plus
Absolutely.
next year.
Because
and then you have
this
the
will
third.
be key to reach the G20 agenda.
Exactly, that's kind of an enabler for it. But the enabler is also what you just said, the third or the top or the bottom, I don't know, the third layer, which is bank to customer. And there it's, of course, a bit more difficult, but one has to understand that most of those flows are still using formats dating from 2009. So 15 years old in our business, this is Stone Age. So we need to make sure that this is also happening. I know there is a lot of work being done, but that also needs to happen because it's a question of ecosystem. Things will go better when the ecosystem has improved, not when one or two or of the three layers have improved. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Suzanne, you want to take it up?
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. I think first, it's more of the infrastructure that has been provided, and then more of how do we have the standards so that bank-to-bank transactions can be able to almost happen instantaneously. And again, transparency is key because at the end of it all, wherever payments are happening, there has to be how do we look at and how do we safeguard ourselves against risks, and more importantly, AML risks, because then we have to make sure that the payments are happening, but in a safe environment, in a secure environment, and more importantly, that we also take care of the financial systems. And with that in mind, then come in the aspects which I think is very critical is the people factor. How do we then make sure that all people are, trained like in a way that the capacity between the players are in a way that the risks are mitigated? Because then you can't talk about efficiencies if, again, you can't be able to be looking at the risks that can come out of that. And for us, that's very important, and it's one of the things that we really ensure that the people within the Central Bank of Kenya and also within the industry are able to manage the transactions as expected.
Okay, right, thanks. And Burkhard, you wanted to react?
Yeah, very briefly. I think we have already seen lots of progress, but more in the technical aspects of here cross-border payments. Dimitri figured that out. But one of the, from my point of view, best examples is definitely ISO 2020 or 22, because here we have the possibility of straight-through processing of cross-border payments, and also we could potentially increase the speed, which is already said, and lower costs of these types of transactions. And then this was from the standard side. Then you have, of course, some very good private initiatives. Well, we are here at the Sibos, so I have to mention the SWIFT GPI. I'm not advertising, so I'm a central banker, but
yeah, he has transparency end to end.
But I really have to reference it because GPI even precedes the roadmap by a couple of years in its bid to enhance the speed of and also the transparency of cross-border payments. So this is then the private side, and also I have then to think about also public initiatives. And as one example, there are many other good ones, but also from the BIS, when you look, for example, at the BIS Innovation Hub project Nexus, which comes into my mind. So here are 5 Southeast Asian countries doing live operations, and this could be another cornerstone for the roadmap. So maybe this is our ecosystem, and then also from a procedural way, I can also say, when I started 3.5 years ago as a member of CPMI, that was, well, a topic, but not on the top priorities. And nowadays, I have the impression that there are only very few other topics, but there's a full concentration and a clear focus of the committee's work on this issue, on the G20 roadmap, and especially the cross-border payments issues.
Great, thanks. Faisal?
I think, Marianne, more need to be done on the agenda alignment side, because you see the topic is very clearly positioned on the top of the agenda for policymakers, but it may not be necessarily at the same level for commercial players. And of course, we are part of this public-private conversations that are taking place under the G20, but I think there is an opportunity to do more there, because when you look at and as a market infrastructure, we often find ourselves in the middle of that. So we have our central banks who are the stakeholders of the system with their ambitious targets, and we have our participants, the commercial players who share those ambitions, but at the same time they have commercial priorities. Because when we look at the 4 objectives, the speed, the cost, the transparency, and the accessibility, all of them come at some sort of cost for these players. Why should, for example, Treasury be available outside the normal windows to deliver faster payments? Why? How to manage compliance when it's an instant payment? That kind of real-life conversations happen on the ground, not only in Buna, but I'm sure in other market infrastructures as well. So there is an agenda alignment that is needed here. Just so to give you an example, in our case, in our advisory community forums, we keep the G20 topic as a standing item to increase the awareness about this topic. And we try from a market infrastructure to provide the maximum enablement to our participants. So enablement in the form of faster payment, enablement in the form of cost-efficient commercials, and the element of having built-in real-time compliance in order to support our community achieve those targets. But I think still need to be more on aligning that agenda between the policymakers and the commercial players.
Right, thanks. Well, so we've talked about, you know, the global agenda of the G20 and what has been done and what needs, where we stand on some criteria and what still needs to be done. There's also some regional initiatives that can help. So I'm thinking of the OECD, for instance, in Europe, which will enable cross-border payments to be instantly processed in Europe in a European payment system. I can think of EAPS also in Africa. There's some regional initiatives you talked about Nexus and so on. So what do you think about these regional initiatives and how they can help achieving the agenda?
Well, personally, I think regional initiatives will play a key role, really key role in the next couple of years as geopolitics makes international global cooperation more challenging. You can also question how good the G20 at the moment are working. So I would say we are living in challenging times, and that makes, for me, those regional initiatives even more important than we have seen it in the past. And then there are furthermore stronger incentives for regional initiatives, thanks also to the closer economic cooperation. So regional factors could be much better taken on board than a global one-size-fits-it-all approach. We are also discussing that in CPMI, because the next step could then be to interlink those regional initiatives. For example, here there have already been trials to interconnect the Eurosystem's TIPS with Buna. Faisal is also with us today. However, from my point of view, there's one point where we may need a real global initiative. One possibility might be an initiative for natural persons that is similar to the legal entity identifier for businesses, because this could address a lot of frictions in cross-border payments, especially with regard to cross-border anti-money laundering and, of course, also cross-border KYC measures. One other possibility could be also to install a similar governance structure to the LEI with a clear set of requirements for the identification of natural persons. However, this would require global cooperation, and here I would say really regional initiatives would fail, so there is a global cooperation needed, I would say, more than ever needed.
Yeah, okay, I understand. And Faisal, I mean, you are an example of a successful regional initiative. So maybe you can tell us a bit more on that and how this could be probably set as a best practice.
Yeah, I believe it's about providing the right ingredients or building blocks. So I go back to the enablement points. As a regional initiative, as a market infrastructure, it's very important to provide the instant capabilities to members. So instant ability to settle payments at any time in multiple currencies, so that contributes to the speed component or speed target. Another enablement is to provide, which also related to speed, is to provide compliance. So providing real-time compliance is also key for faster payments across borders, because otherwise there's no point in saying that we want to do faster payments and then we stop the payment for investigations for hours or days. So these capabilities needs to be automated, and Buna today is providing that capability. Now on the enablement for contributing towards the cost factor, obviously public infrastructures like Buna and other infrastructures around the world, being not profit focused or profit centric, gives that capability to provide fee structure that is competitive to their participants, so that participants can pass it to the end users, being clients of retail nature or corporates. Within the cost comes liquidity also. Liquidity has a cost, and having an instant liquidity solution within the market infrastructure in collaboration with its members reduces the cost of liquidity on the participants, which contributes to the target of both actually speed and cost. On the transparency and the accessibility, obviously, again, on the enablement side, infrastructures should open their systems to different types of players and should provide end-to-end tracing capabilities. In our case, for example, through the partnership with SWIFT, all our payments are traceable through GPI. Other also set of APIs are available to provide that last mile visibility on the payment. We even did recently a modification in our rule book to have a 10 seconds delivery of SLA delivery on payments. So these building blocks, I call them, I think it's critical for market infrastructures around the world to put them together to contribute. So there will be no one silver bullet that will address everything, but at least having those building blocks can take us one day towards these targets. And last but not least, also mentioned by colleague Burkhard, is the interlinking, because there's a huge bit on the interlinking aspect between payment systems around the world to contribute towards these targets. So we see today Buna TIPS collaboration as an example is potentially a great example for two large regions to streamline payments between them and take a step forward towards the G20 targets.
All right, thank you. Maybe Suzanne, you want to react on the regional initiatives and what's happening in Africa? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. Regional initiatives, in my view, is a way of finding local solutions to global problems. I'll give the example of IPS, which is the local solution in the East African community. And it's been in existence for the last 10 years, and over 10 years. And when you look at what has happened is, over time, we've been able to increase trade within the community. Actually, for Kenya, 40% of our exports is to the East African community. And IPS actually settles in our local currencies, and hence it eliminates the liquidity risk that could have, occurred if the settlement was possibly in US dollar or in euros. In addition, is also we've seen more e-wallet development within the region through M-Pesa payments, which is an e-wallet solution. And this kind of regional initiatives, it is, and it works better because most people within a specific region, they share social, cultural, and economic, I'll say, values. And out of sharing those then values, then they will easily understand each other, and they will easily understand and have same levels possibly of development. And hence, when it comes to such an initiative, it's even easier to come together. It's, it's more accessible to reach, like Tanzania from Kenya or Uganda from Kenya. And so those people, they can be able to come together and they can be able to come up with the solutions that are expected at that specific time.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. I mean, I think it's really by what you said, I mean, by combining global solutions in terms of transparency, speed, in terms of also, making sure that data are pre-validated, so there's no hiccups in the payments. So ISO 20022 and these local regional initiatives that will by themselves, collecting by themselves, will contribute to the global agenda of the G20. So now I'd like to turn to you as central bankers. How can you help concretely achieve the G20 agenda? So, of course, it's high on the agenda, as you said, Dimitri. It's, you have now Christine Lagarde and all the key people really on board on this. But But concretely on market infrastructure, so interlinking you were mentioning, but also on regulation, you know, there's a lot to do on the regulation, harmonizing AML, for instance, you know, processes and so on. What can be done?
Should I start?
Yeah, at your level.
Okay. Well, as market infrastructure providers, I think we as central bankers bear a lot of responsibility, of course, for the smooth functioning of the systems, of payment systems, both internationally and also, of course, domestically. And in this role, we have already taken steps to enhance our services, well, including implementing ISO 2022 to all our market infrastructures and intending also our opening hours for the euro areas RTGS system. So interlinking, of course, I can also repeat again. However, I would say that from a central bank's perspective, it's most important that we address the still existing risks in the system. So these risks could also increase when expanding access to our services, for example. This is why we tread carefully when adjusting our systems. And from a central bank's perspective, security, operational resilience, and also, well, you have also mentioned it, the legal soundness of payment systems must always be our priorities. There's no doubt from a central banker's perspective. Then you have also asked on the regulation. From a regulatory point of view, I would say it is important to understand the limited role that central banks play when it comes to regulation. I have been part of a regulatory body for some while, but now, when I compare this with a role as a central banker, I would say there is a rather limited role. While we can certainly advise regulators that on certain issues, most central banks do not have really the power to issue general legislation. However, you could do this advice, and we have of course, already advised the regulators in the past and will also to continue to do so in order to reduce then regulatory fractions, that's for sure. And in the Eurosystem, maybe Dimitri will also speak on that, we are doing, for example, that advice at the moment towards the European legislators when it comes to the digital euro legislation or the single currency package as the European Commission named it. So advice, yes, but there is, from my point of view, a limited role when it comes to regulation itself.
Interesting.
Monsieur, I'm happy that you started. No, indeed, I can only subscribe to that. There is, what I would like to highlight is that it's, everyone has to build his own building block. I was mentioning, sorry to come back to that, I was mentioning the interoperability in Europe. Actually, we, because as a central bank, we also operate a fast payment system, we were actually the only ones having the incentive to implement that. It would not have happened without us, let's be clear. And I believe it's very important to recognize that there is a mutual recognition. I think you mentioned, Marianne, the public-private collaboration on that. I think it's key that we have a mutual recognition of who can bring what brick in the wall. I think that's really key. There are things we can do. Burkhard, you mentioned at the regulatory side, we better respect the segregation of the UTs there, and we can work together, but we should also know who is the deciding party. But it's this combination of effort that will pay off. One more point, Burkhard, you mentioned risks, and that we need to manage risks. And that's always core to what we do. And I just want to highlight, because everyone except me, I think, talked about interlinking. And I mean, if some of you have not seen the communication that we did during the night, it was not on purpose, it's because it was starting from Frankfurt. During the night, there was an announcement on our website that we would for sure be more active in interlinking in the coming months and years. I will not give you all the strategy that we developed. I mean, you can go and read it on the website. Sorry, but one point on risks. There is one initiative also linking to the regional dimension. We will implement cross-border payments, what we call intra-TIPS. So, as you know, TIPS is settling multiple currencies. 2 currently. There will be a third one, Danish krona, as from April next year. And we came naturally to the conclusion that we share the same scheme. We share the same technical platform. So what's left before we can engage into cross-currency? And that's what we are busy doing. We change request 65 for those who want to take note. We are changing the system to support that. It will be delivered end of next year, in 2025. And the beauty of the model is that it eliminates actually the settlement risk. It's one unit of processing that makes the cross-border payment happen. So settlement risk is brought literally to zero. So that's very important. And that links a bit to the previous question of regional initiatives and so on. We will also do interlinking, both bilateral and multilateral. Burkhard, you mentioned Nexus. We will investigate that going forward. And that's where the bits and pieces of the puzzle come together. So it's hard work, but it's necessary work, I think.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for bringing that new announcement. That is important. And Suzanne, so what could be done at your central bank to contribute to the G20 in your view?
Yeah, thank you. A number of things that central banks can do. First is to provide leadership. And as the Central Bank of Kenya, we've done that. In the last week, we actually adapted the ISO 2022 standards, and this was out of really a lot of hard work by our colleagues and the industry, just to make sure that we join the 57 other countries that have adopted those standards, and actually we're the second ones from Africa. The second thing we're doing to bring costs down and also to make sure that we enhance interoperability is we have started a journey towards a fast payment system. We had lagged behind us as Kenya on that space, but then we thought that we need to be able to make a public good decision given our market structure, because those who are and do know about Kenya is we have a market structure where we have a dominant player on the mobile payment space. And then thirdly is to always make sure that we remain innovative and that we adapt technology to enable us to do proper supervisory, to enhance our regulatory framework. And currently we are adapting the GDI, the granular data integration, where we will be able to do surveillance almost on a real-time basis. Then that puts us in a space where we're really certain and confident of what is happening within the banking industry. And I think finally also collaborating with other financial sector regulators is very key for us, because then we're able to make sure that we have a safe, secure financial sector within the Kenyan market.
Yeah, great, thanks. I'd like to turn to new technologies, because this could help as well, right? I mean, AI, CBDCs, you know, real-time, we're talking about real-time compliance, maybe we can have real-time currency controls and so forth. So these technologies could help. So very quickly, because I see time is running. So Burkhard, how those could help?
Well, of course, new technologies are always playing an important role, that's for sure. When I look, for example, at the level of process reached by in the field of CBDC, you have mentioned that most of them will not be live by then, and most of them have a clear a domestic priority. That's also absolutely for sure. So I do not believe, therefore, that this will help in the very short term. I'm in that respect rather pessimistic, despite the fact that I'm always an optimist. But whether the use of new technology, for example, DLT, has the potential to significantly improve the correspondent banking business, this is, for example, an interesting question for me, and we are also discussing that at our central bank at the moment. The FX costs and the management of liquidity in foreign currencies are definitely a pain point which needs to be addressed. But regarding the compliance cost, there are already some promising BIS hub projects to automate compliance. So this is, from my point of view, a good example, Project Mandela, to mention here. And then, well, no answer to such a question without AI, obviously. The technology here in this field has taken a huge step forward in the past few years, and I could envision, from my point of view, an AI reducing some of the regulatory friction in translating, of course, the payment messages, also clear. Also, with regard to satisfy and fit the requirements of other jurisdictions. However, security has to be our main concern, I would say, and this may delay the use of AI really in our field, until it is thoroughly tested. But definitely in the upcoming years, AI will also here in the field of payments play a much more prominent role.
Great. Who wants to react on AI or new technologies?
Well, first of all, well, for me, AI is no longer a new technology. It's maybe a provocative statement. It's there, and everyone is using it, and it's.
But most of the people are seeing AI still as a new technology.
Yeah.
So you are much more far advanced.
I believe it's used a lot, and I genuinely believe it will help a lot. I mean, there is no single day where we don't discuss AI, so I will not develop that. Just coming back 2 seconds on the DLT, and I promise we did not compare notes, but I have the same view as Burkhard, basically. The DLT deliver, I mean, you read a lot of promises around DLTs in terms of flow of information, transparency, even up to sharing same infrastructures across jurisdictions and so on. And I genuinely believe that over time this will come, but it will take time. And for a few reasons. One is we like to believe that we can go straight to norming, but that does not exist. The first phase is always storming. When you enter into a new field, you start always, whether you like it or not is not relevant. There is always a storming phase. Everyone starts locally. I want to serve my own purpose because before I can afford starting to think globally. So I believe there will be a storming phase on DLT, but I also believe that there will be a norming phase afterwards. The governance will be an element of real discussions in those new setups. And then, of course, as Burkhard, as you said, I think the legal, regulatory, supervisory frameworks, well, we will face the same issues as the one we face now with, I would say, traditional technologies.
That's the point, yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Maybe because we have 5 minutes, so in a few words, just one last question, which embeds 2 questions, actually, is, okay, after all what we have said, do you still believe those targets, the G20 targets by 2027 are still realistic? And what SWIFT role would you see play?
You take a risk, Marianne, that we don't cover the second part.
That's fine. You cover what you want. Yeah, Suzanne.
Yeah, I think that the G20 targets are realistic, and I have 2 appeals. One to SWIFT, possibly consider also playing a key role in bringing down the costs. Secondly, my appeal is on the G20 group, that whereas we know that G20, of course, represent countries that make 85% of world GDP, 75% of the world trade, and they represent 2/3 of the world population. That in the spirit of leaving no one behind, possibly the targets can be changed from G20 targets to a more appealing name, so that we have possibly a name that can be like towards attaining efficiency in payments. That one will be acceptable to everyone.
Okay, good. César?
I would say realistic on the three components except the cost. I see a challenge in the cost targets. I go back to the agenda alignment. I think there's more to be done on aligning the agenda or give it more appealing name for all the communities, especially the commercial players around the world to subscribe to it. So that's my view on that.
Thank you.
If I may, I will try in 1 minute, but 3 topics. I just want to rebound on what you just said, because I think it's extremely important. We did not mention, for instance, the COP task force that is actually working, work done within the central banks. It's probably not known widely, but there are already today more than 20 more, jurisdictions. It's not limited to the G20. In the COP task force, there is, I don't know the exact number, but I think 25 more countries contributing to that work. It's essential to go beyond the limits of G20. I think that's an objective that is really important. On the targets, I see a lot of work being done. I see a lot of guidance being provided and a lot of decisions being taken. Well, if that does not bring any benefit in the end, I don't understand. There will be benefit. It will come. I had prepared for more. If you had more time, there is the element of implementation. We take a decision, then we need to implement, and then we see the benefits. But believe me, there is a lot going on there. If you allow me 20 seconds on the role of SWIFT, it's essential. It's instrumental in achieving the benefits. You act as an implementer. You have the ISO accelerator package for smaller market infrastructures and so on. You also contribute, you gave some statistics. You are also instrumental in giving statistics to the world, basically. And again, as I said earlier, as long as you don't go beyond the perception, you don't get any results. I mean, there the role of SWIFT is really, really key. And this event is another example. I mean, there is kind of in French we say caisse de résonance. So there is the reach that you have in events like this is really instrumental again in achieving that.
Thank you.
Well, very briefly on SWIFT, I agree with Dimitri, so I wouldn't elaborate on that anymore. And on the targets, well, the targets were set in a different time in 2021. That's my view, which means that the goal of reaching them is now even more ambitious. We all know that progress in a very complex environment like our field of international payments needs some time, and actions may need time before they achieve a visible effect to the end user. So aiming to meet these target triggers discussions between the public and also the private sector, but also within the private sector itself. This, I would say, keeps moving forward towards the targets. But to end with a positive note, I remain cautiously optimistic.
Thank you. Well, I think we can really give a big applause to our panelists.
To you as
Thank
well.
you. Thank you.
To tomorrow.
Thank you to all.